I'm Luke Storey. For the past 22 years, I've been relentlessly committed to my deepest passion, designing the ultimate lifestyle based on the most powerful principles of spirituality, health, psychology, and personal development. The Lifestylist Podcast is a show dedicated to sharing my discoveries and the experts behind them with you. All right, you guys, so I did a Mendi session this morning.
Okay.
And I was really proud of myself. I got an 83, which is not my highest. I'm up in the 90s sometimes. And for those listening, you'll understand what we're talking about soon, but I just wanted to start with this. Mm-hmm. My neural activity was 41%. Is that high, or does it depend on the person?
It depends on the person. It's high. It's probably higher than I have ever achieved.
When you're using Mendi, are you competing with yourself and your past scores more so than the general population?
100%.
Okay.
It's about learning what it is that you did to make you be able to function at that level.
Okay, cool. Because I think that's quite high for mine. And then control 43 seconds. But this one was really impressive to me. The resilience is 11,639, which I think is much higher than mine usually are. Sometimes they're like 3,000.
I think that's higher than I've got.
Yeah.
Might be.
Well, and I haven't been that consistent. When I first got, and for those watching the video, I'm talking about this headband, and we'll get in. I'm skipping to like what should be 75% into the conversation. But as I said, I was just excited. But I like taking notes on what I did or didn't do, and I was telling Moha earlier that I've tried all sorts of different combinations of when I meditate, when I don't, how much sleep I got, take an ice bath, take nootropics, microdose, etc., to try to figure out what the sweet spot is. But I know what I did this morning. I took a microdose of DMT, 5-MeO DMT actually. Then I meditated, had a great deep hour-long Joe Dispenza meditation. Then I went out, got a lot of sun, didn't drink anything else or have any kind of supplements. Then I took an ice bath, and then I came in and did this and got, for me, what's a really high score. So maybe ice baths and DMT are the key. But anyway, you guys, we'll talk about what all of that means later. Why don't you two introduce yourselves? Obviously, you're going to have very different sounding voices, so people will get to know them. But if you want to start, Melissa, and just tell us who you are, what you're about, your practice, all the things you're up to, and then we'll get your introduction, and then we'll dive in.
I'm Dr. Melissa Wittman. I specialize in pediatric brain injuries, neurodevelopmental disorders, and really anything that has to do with brain optimization as well. Really, if I can take a child who drowned and improve their brain, get them ideally walking and talking again. If an athlete comes to me or if someone comes to me to optimize their life, that's pretty cool.
I was watching some of your videos and I listened to your podcast, and I think we share a passion for wild technology. I was like, oh yeah, she knows. Like, you walked in and you're like, oh, you got the biocharger? I'm like, she knows what's up. Yeah, cool. I'm excited. I'm so glad you were both able to make it too. It's always fun to get a couple of perspectives. Moha, so we met through our mutual friend Josh Trent, and it's so funny what the cat is doing right now. He never plays or pays attention to anything, and now he's really going catnip on the stage. That's very strange. We met through Josh Trent, and when Josh and I find a person or a brand or just anything interesting, we're kind of the go-to guys for each other. And he's like, man, come out to dinner, you got to meet my friend Moha. And I'm like, man, I live a half an hour away from dinners in downtown Austin. That's a commitment. That's like an hour drive time, usually end of the day I'm kind of tired. He's like, no man, you got to meet this guy.
Well, I flew in for that dinner.
You flew in, and I'm complaining about driving 25 minutes.
Yeah.
And we really just hit it off. And Josh is a good barometer of quality people. I love Josh,
such a good human.
He's a good dude.
And Brian, great guy.
Yeah,
friend of yours.
And so we had a really good time, and it was interesting because it's like, I don't know, for some reason the dynamic of that dinner is we were each kind of sharing our areas of expertise or our gifts. And we were talking to you and kind of picking your brain about entrepreneurship and investing and business, which you're great at. And then we're kind of telling you about spiritual concepts, and we're all just really fueling each other. It was such a great night.
It was so easy. In Costa Rica, we say, Dios los hace y ellos se encuentran, which means God makes them and then they find each other. And it was one of those moments where we just sat down. It was just a great night. I bumped into Brian and his girlfriend a week ago. We were hanging out, and it was literally like it was the day after. Hadn't seen him since.
Well, that's one thing I find really interesting about you is you have this very mobile, jet-setting kind of lifestyle. I'm fascinated by it because I think earlier in life when I was younger, I was more resilient to travel. But now, man, to like fly somewhere, I gotta really want to go there. And you're just like, cool, dinner in Austin, I'll fly it from Costa Rica or fly in from Sweden or whatever. It's really interesting how you've set up your life.
Well, for me, I think it would be exhausting if there wasn't a purpose to it. But everything that I do, I know that it's meaningful. So for me, it's not a sacrifice at all. It's like, done, like, let's do it. Everything is easy. It's like, I don't see the distance. I don't see that I'm going to be on a flight for hours. It's no different than just, you're at the house next to me, So it's that approach to life. And because I'm so excited about what I get to do, and I'm so grateful for this life that I have, that, I almost partly many times can't believe that I have it. It just makes all these things be just easy.
Well, I think if you could, I don't know you that well, we're getting to know one another, but I think if you could boil down at least part of your life philosophy, it's that it's just easy, man.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about money and stuff that night. You've done really well for yourself, and Josh and I were like, man, how do you do it? And you're like, it's just easy, you just do it. We're like, yeah, but how, It's like everything's easy. If you decide everything's easy, it is. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. It sounds, kind of trite, but it's like we create our own struggle.
Yeah.
And this is true of health issues too, right? It's like the more we invest in them and give power to them, the more we feel victimized.
Well, if you want to look at a great example of this, I'll tell you the story of how me and Melissa met. What, a week ago?
Yeah,
10 days ago.
2 weeks ago maybe.
Yeah, less than 2 weeks ago, literally. We're at the biohacking conference and in Orlando, and she DMs me, and I end up meeting her for a minute, and then she's like, come see what we're doing using Mendi and using other technologies to help these kids with TBI, with traumatic brain injuries. And I go there, and it's just incredible what they do. And my approach was like, you're a fucking superhero. Why doesn't everybody know about you? So when you called me up and you're like, do you want to be in my podcast? I was like, well, let's get Melissa out there because the world needs to see what she's doing. Like I admire what she does. It's like, let's kind of use me as kind of like a Trojan horse to get that message out and get that voice out. And it's so for me, it's like it's that easy. It's like you just don't ask. In Costa Rica, we say no pida permiso, pida perdón, which means never ask for permission, always apologize.
I love that.
Yeah,
I didn't know you all had it in Costa Rica too.
Because we just realized that we screwed up your setup with the microphones because it's 2 guests instead of 1, and that's beautiful. We'll apologize afterwards, and this is going to be magical, and it's easy.
I followed that principle in building this house. Don't tell anyone. A lot of unorthodox things happened here while it was under construction. Tell us about. So your parents are from Libya, and immigrated to Costa Rica, which I find is interesting. I mean, I've only spent a few trips in Costa Rica, but I don't think I've met many people from Libya there. Were you kind of an outsider in a foreign land there? I mean, were you?
100%. I mean, so
was your sense that we're immigrants and we're different than the natives here?
Well, I feel more Costa Rican than anything else, even though I'm full Libyan. So my parents fled in the late 70s. And when Gaddafi started nationalizing all the private industries and just taking away, people's, and the whole thing happened was because my dad had a buddy in Italy, in Rome, who was a Costa Rican diplomat. And he was literally like, hey, if you got $10,000, you can get a residency. And that's how Costa Rica happened. So I ended up being Costa Rican just because my dad had a buddy of his that was like, hey man, you got $10,000, let's go to Costa Rica. It's this little country nobody knows about. It's basically a jungle. There's like no development, and that's how we ended up there. And since 1980, that's where our base was. And so I grew up speaking Spanish as my mother tongue. My sister was already 3 years old when we got there, but my parents had to learn the language there. And yeah, that obviously, that did make me feel as like an outsider until I wasn't. And it's a very clear moment when I wasn't. Like, to me, it's very easy to spot that moment when I wasn't an outsider anymore.
When was that?
I've said this story a million times. It's actually after not making I was at this school called ICS, and I had not made the junior varsity team because I was 2 years younger than all the other boys in school. What that did is it made me, and now I'm known as like a strong guy and a fit guy and all that. But back then, it's like I was a child. You're like 10 and the kids are 12, or you're 11 and your classmates are 13. Like you're a boy and they're men. So that forced me to become really good friends with the girls. And I was like one of the girly guys because I was, wimpy because I hadn't developed right. And what that did is I remember listening to a song, which is A New Level by Pantera. And I grew up listening to metal. And that song just kind of became this mantra that I would repeat over and over and over. And to this day, it's still like kind of something that automatically happened. And it's just like, I kind of found my identity. I was never fully Costa Rican. I was never fully Libyan. I'm never going to really fit in anywhere, but it doesn't matter because I'm, and that's when I started to get, you could argue, obsessed with the food chain and how it works and my place in the food chain and establishing what animal I was. And it was very clear that I wasn't the biggest or the strongest, but I was scary and I could survive even if I didn't fit in, and that's when I became obsessed with, or I understood that I was a jaguar and that even if the jaguar is in the snow in Sweden, the jaguar is still going to eat. It doesn't really belong there, but it's going to do fine because it's a jaguar. And that's kind of my approach to life. And that's what leads to everything being easy. It's like, well, I'm a jaguar. It's going to be fine, Not in the right place, but it doesn't matter because I'm here. And my perspective has had a lot to do with the hardships from being little. And a lot of my fuck ups, my overdose. We've talked about drugs and all sorts of stuff. And I'm just very grateful to be here, man. It's great to see you again.
Likewise.
I hadn't seen you in a long time.
Likewise.
Yeah.
I gotta back up on that. How old were you when you overdosed, and what was your weapon of choice?
16. And it was a lot of alcohol. It was tequila, and with a combination of cocaine, LSD, which is very common, and probably more stuff. Yeah.
That sounds like a brutal combination. If I thought of a drug and alcohol combo that would make you feel good, that would not be it. And so, but
I was in a coma for 5 days after that.
Wow.
We were talking about that yesterday. I actually asked her yesterday because she was talking about comas and stuff, and I was like, well, I wonder if I have any brain damage, lasting brain damage from my coma.
Yeah.
And she was, what was your assessment of that?
Quite possibly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you haven't brought him in and given him a scan and assessment?
Yeah, we should do that.
Yeah.
Seems to be pretty high functioning. But
I
sometimes,
would agree.
but sometimes when we have a deficit,
Seems to be, he says.
sometimes when we have a deficit like that, though, I think some of us become successful because we have to overcompensate to function.
Oh, 100%.
Absolutely, yeah.
100%. Like,
Yeah.
one of the keys to my success has been being terrible at most things. Like, I was never a reader. I'm not a big reader now. It's like I was shit in school. I was just like, my ADHD is like I couldn't focus on anything. Like, all these things kind of became the thing that drove me to become, more successful than I was meant to be, I guess you could say. That is surrounding myself with great people, which is, has been a blessing, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've listened to a couple of your podcasts, Josh Trent's show being one of them, in preparation for this, and I appreciate people when they have some degree of humility. I think humility is a really beautiful virtue and principle, and something I strive to have myself as much as I can. I'm actually the most humble guy in the room right now. It's my favorite corny dad joke. There's a story about this famous speaker, and he gets up on stage and he goes, well, he looks at the crowd, he said, I was going to give my talk on humility tonight, but there's not enough people in the room. But something I've heard in your sort of self-deprecating persona is, I'm a dummy. I just surround myself with a bunch of smart people, and I would, and you didn't say that here today, but I know it's something you say on a somewhat regular basis, and I would push back on that and argue, because each human being is intelligent in their own unique way, right? So your ADHD and your problems with drugs and being small and feeling insecure and whatever you went through, the adaptation that was created based on your innate nature is what I think likely led you to the intelligence that you embody now and that you use to your advantage and for your ability to be of service in the world, right? So it's like there's all kinds of different ways to be smart. There's a lot of ways in which I feel very dumb. Try to get me like to do some math with a pencil and a piece of paper. We're not going to get very far. But I might be able to walk into a room and feel a room out and use my empathy to help people to feel more comfortable and have a conversation like this, right? And someone's intelligence might be sitting down at a piano and they've never played one before and they can play it. Yeah. There's musical intelligence, kinesiological intelligence, all of these things. So I think you're a smart fucking guy. I'm not going to let you say that on my show in case you were planning to.
I appreciate it. I love that I'm getting like the moniker that I'm humble. Like I'm just honest. Honest, I'll give you. I don't know if humble or or smart, but I'll take it from you. I appreciate that. And being small is what led me to being bigger and being very in shape and all that. So I can see these limitations. They drive us and they're positives, right? And anything that is seen as a disadvantage can be our superpower. And I truly believe in that. So I'm not trying to be what I'm not. I'm just honest, and I'm, and that opens up, just the amount of goodwill equity that I will get just from admitting that I don't know things is incredible. That's what's opened up all our collaborations with the scientific community. And that's what brings, very, people that know way, way more than I do about what I do. Like Melissa, for example, who understands the technology that I, or my company better than I do. Like there's a beauty in just not trying to compete with people and just saying like, oh, come and help me. And that's just like, and now we're here.
Building a team. And that's like, we were talking about that at dinner with another person on the Mendi team last night. And you have such a beautiful vision for that. And that's really what sets this company apart.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's an intelligence in and of itself, right? Is being able to spot talent and create an Avengers super team. That talent for connectivity, right? Like seeing, oh, if I introduce this person to that person, they each have complementary skills and talents and relationships, and then magic will ensue. It's one of the things I really enjoy and get to practice a lot in this podcast is just seeing, ooh, I see a connection between that person, and then just introduce them and watch the fire start and see what happens.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. So so I listened to your podcast the other day.
Okay.
Melissa. Is it called The Autistic Woman?
The Autistic Female.
The Autistic Female, okay. And I kind of scrolled around and I wanted to get something that gave me some information about who you are and what you do. So I went to the first episode in which you and your partner talked about you discovering later in life that you're autistic to some degree.
Yep.
I thought that was really interesting. So we could do a whole podcast about that, I'm sure.
Yeah, we definitely could.
What led you into the work that you do, your interests first, and then what was it that led you to kind of dig further in your own experience and to see what's making you tick?
So I found the field of functional neurology, so that's my specialty, is functional neurology and developmental functional neurology. About 3 months into grad school, it was a Friday night, and so that tells you anything about my personality. I was at the Friday night lecture, and it was Professor Ted Carrick presenting, and he was talking about using functional neurology for various things for brain injuries, as well as bringing patients out of comas, and I mean, it just blew my mind. And when I went to grad school, I knew that I was not going to be taking a traditional route, but it was also very clear to me that that's where I was supposed to be. So it was very confusing in the first couple months of, I'm here, but I know that I'm not going to do kind of the traditional route with this. What does this look like? And I just was patient with it. I kept feeling that like, it'll come. And that night I literally went home and I'm like, this is it for me. Like signed, sealed, delivered. This is the direction I'm going. And I spent once a month driving to Orlando for 2.5 years, in addition to being in grad school to finish that diplomate program. And I was there with practicing doctors going through all of it. And it's just phenomenal. And so much of neuroscience and neuropsychology, all of these fields are really fascinating, but they stop at the point of figuring out what it is. And to me, that's just not good enough. I'm like, well, what about neuroplasticity? You're all talking about neuroplasticity. Do something with it, right? So when we are looking at the brain, like what I focus on is I do a neurological exam. I look at where are the deficits, what are the deficits, and how can I make a change? Can I make a change? Almost always yes. And how do I make that change? And then it's off to the races. And it doesn't matter if it's a child who just drowned, a severe autism case, a UT baseball player that, we see a few of the UT baseball players. It really doesn't matter who's in front of me, because I know how the brain develops, how the brain works, and it's awesome. And it doesn't get old. I've been doing it over 10 years, and it's exciting every single day. Very emotional as well, the cases that I see, but it's really exciting. Yeah.
And what's the difference for those like myself that aren't familiar with the classifications? What's the difference between a functional neurologist and a standard neurologist? Is it akin to, an allopathic Western MD versus a functional medicine doctor, where you're looking at more root causes than just symptom treatment and management?
Yeah, sort of like that. I usually describe it as a neurologist will look at an MRI to see which bridges are blown up, and I'll look at it and say what alternative routes are left. So that's kind of a comparison.
Got it, okay.
Yeah.
And then what led your curiosity to find out if you were autistic?
Nothing. I was not curious about it. I was not looking at it. My husband brought me a TikTok video of a woman who was autistic and, put together, she was in grad school, all these things. And he's like, honey, I think you're autistic. And I just remember exactly where I was sitting. I think my youngest was 2 at the time. I was probably nursing him something. I looked at him and I was like, I am in this field. Like I would know. I have social anxiety. I'm introverted, all of these reasons, right? And so I decided to look into it to prove him wrong. I was like, fine, I'll do this. I'll figure out what screening tests to take just so you can, we can kind of put this to rest. Because again, I'm in this field. I was trained in this. Well, come to find out, I scored off the charts in every single screening test, and that was like a whole mindfuck of, wait a second, reframing my life. It made my life make a lot more sense, because instead of me just always thinking I sucked at everything and it was just so hard for me, I'm like, oh, my brain works differently, just like I would tell a patient if they were in front of me. But the research on autism up until really the last 5 years was all done on males. So the DSM criteria, what I was trained to look for, making eye contact, all of these different things, shows up completely different in a female. And it's missed. Current research is that 80% of females are still undiagnosed. Autistic females are undiagnosed at age 18. That's crazy.
Wow, that is crazy.
And so I had a patient in this week, and she's a 16-year-old, and the change it made in her life and her family's life to just have this, and I'm not diagnosing her, but I'm saying, hey, take this screening test, and I'm also seeing all of the things on exam, right? So right brain deficit and all the things that go along with that. And just her demeanor and simply me being able to have that conversation with her and relate to her reminded me why I'm doing this podcast, even though it's completely out of my comfort zone to have an autistic female podcast. It was such a reminder for that. And so as I've been looking into all of this, it has also changed educating the doctors around me. And, in my field going forward, I'm speaking at a conference in, I don't remember, September or October, for an hour, just on autistic females to my colleagues. That's like crazy, but really exciting, Yeah.
When you took the assessment and started to backtrack through your subjective experience, what were some of the things about yourself that matched?
Like when you're looking at the questions?
Yeah, like in the podcast I listened to, you were talking about how when you were in school, I don't know if it's high school or whatever, that you'd go eat your lunch in the library.
I ate lunch in the library.
So I was like,
yes.
When I heard that, I was like, maybe I'm autistic, because if I would have thought of that, I would have definitely done that too.
I did. I ate lunch in the library every day. I could not handle the cafeteria. At the beginning of each school year, I'd try. I'd be like, I'm going to do this. And it was miserable. I would just be completely sensory overload for the rest of the day. And I really liked school. I enjoyed it, the school part of it. But the social aspect, I was at a very big high school, like 500 people in my class, probably about 2,000 kids in the school. And it was so overwhelming to me. Everyone would meet in like the middle foyer area, and I always took the back stairwells. I never went through that middle area. And I've gotten, actually just last week, I got a message from a friend that I had in high school who's been listening to the podcast, and it's really interesting because I haven't spoke to her. I mean, I graduated from high school in 2006. It's been a while. And she's like, I've really been loving the podcast. You know, this is really cool. I'm happy for you that you're doing this. This is someone who's very social, like she's not listening to it, I don't think, because she thinks she's autistic. But I decided to dig into that a little bit. And I was like, hey, I really enjoyed our friendship, but I always struggled with just like understanding how the dynamic should work and all of these different things. And she said, I never saw you as any different than any other friend. And I've not been able to have a conversation with someone from my childhood or past to have that reflected back. And that was so interesting because the story in my head and in my body and how I felt like it would have been so obvious. And it just goes to show, again, like a big thing with autistic females is masking and camouflaging, of being able to observe the social situation and fit in, basically, and then go home and be exhausted and, you know, not really be able to function beyond that. And so that was really, really interesting to have reflected back to me.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
Self-knowledge is so powerful.
Yeah.
You know, like when I was talking about with Moha's, identifying our strengths and capitalizing on them.
Yeah.
It's like with no self-inquiry and self-knowledge, we really are rudderless. We're lost. And it's also really hard on your self-esteem. You know, only finished, I think, 7 grades in school and did poorly and had all kinds of behavioral problems. Always felt super dumb my whole life. Just felt like everyone was smarter than me. You know, I don't read a lot. We share a lot. I try. When audiobooks came out, I was like, oh, reading is definitely over now.
That's it.
But you know, over time and doing the work that I do, it's been invaluable, man, to just go, okay, well, I have different skills than some other people, but I do have some. You know, let's find out what they are, and let's just hone in on that and focus on that and cut out the noise and stop trying to be good at the things that I'm just not that good at.
Have you seen that comic where it's like a horse, a fish, a turtle, and something else, and they're like, okay, it's time for your test, climb the tree.
Oh, wow.
And that's how a lot of public school is.
Yeah.
You take all of these amazing talents and creatures and you're like, go climb the tree, and that's what you're going to get judged on.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I think I have like micro PTSD just from being in school those 7 years. It's like, it was torture. I hated school, and I had a trauma and other issues, I'm sure, that didn't help, but yeah, whatever the school system was set up to teach and how it was set up to teach that way did not fit my personality and my brain at all, ever. It's horrible. Moha, so you're a kid in Costa Rica, and then at some point, I think in adulthood, you ventured to Libya during the Arab Spring, or went there and then... Right before? And then this
right before it had happened
erupted.
while I was there, yeah. I went to do a commercial transaction, and I ended up staying there, and that kind of like shifted my life. I've had like a few shifts, and by the way, I didn't have much money or anything. It's not like I was like some, you know, billionaire that's going there to become philanthropic, and like it was just literally, it was like I was there, and I was so overwhelmed with this feeling of people wanting freedom and people wanting equality and wanting a chance that, in hindsight, it was a shit show, of course, but like the intention was there. There was something so powerful and so impactful that was about to happen that I had to be a part of it. So it was, you know, I was never forced to stay there. So I ended up having that whole adventure and being in the war in Libya based on my own decision. Like, it was because I have a very strong sense of right and wrong, and I was like, well, this is worth doing. This is the right thing to do. This is more important than anything I would do going back to Costa Rica and watching it on TV. And yeah, I was there, and you know, and it seemed like, it felt like one of those change the world moments. And I ended up staying there, and I ended up setting up some schools, and I started doing as much good as I could and stuff. And I've always had this thing where I wanted to do good, and I will tell you, it's a lot easier to focus on it fully when you don't have to worry about money and paying bills. So that's my, like, one of the pieces of advice that I give a lot of people is like, you know what, like if you can have more money, then you can do a lot more good. And that's kind of one of the first conversations that I had with Melissa. I was taking a run. I was running like in Beverly Hills or something. I was in LA, and we just did a call, and I was like, why are you hiding? Like, you're a fucking superhuman. Like, what you're doing is unbelievable. You know, we've got all these, you know, all these influencers showing their asses and their tits. They've got millions of followers. Everybody worships them like they're doing this incredible life. You're actually fucking rehabilitating children's lives. Like, you're literally doing like miracle, like the closest thing to what prophets would do. Like, you're using lasers and using things like Mendi and other technology to rehabilitate human beings. Like, why are you not on the cover of everything? And then she's like, well, and she can say it better, but she's like, you know, I grew up poor and I've always believed in working in silence. And I was like, fuck that. You should have $1 billion and you should have a billion people seeing what you're doing.
Yes.
Because that's how we change the world. You can impact 10 people or you can impact 100 million.
Yes.
And that's...
Totally. It was one of those conversations where, you know, you get those messages in meditation or something just over and over. And like, for sure, money, that's been my like main block pretty much my whole life. I've worked through a lot of stuff, but money. And so I've worked through a lot of that. And then the last couple of months, it's been like, okay, put yourself out there, right? So I start the podcast and I'm like, okay, universe, I'll put myself out there. That's it, right? No, that's not it, right? So then we're having this conversation and he said, what do you want? And I'm like, I don't know. It's not like, oh, I have X amount of dollars or I have this that I want. And I said, I just know I'm not supposed to hide anymore. I'm not supposed to just be in a room with one patient at a time and having that be my impact. That is a massive impact. And I'm very humbled and grateful to have that. But how much more can I do really, you know, beyond that? It's pretty cool and pretty exciting. And I also know the times that I have made money, I mean, I turn around and I just give it back to whoever I can. And that's just the way I am. And I love to do that. And so that's where he was like, yeah, you can do a lot more of that if you are like, you know, out there and opening yourself up and helping
for
all
me,
these
it was
people.
like, let's put a magnifying glass on those values that you have and all this magic, because I admire you, I look up to you, but the problem is people are never going to hear about you. There's people out there with kids that need this. There's people that need your help that are never going to hear. So it's like, so for me, my approach is if you're helping 100 people like you are and you're changing their lives, that's unbelievable, that's incredible. But if you're helping 100 people when you could have helped 1 million people, fuck you. It's not even, oh, good. No, it's fuck you. Because what about all those other 990, like, understand, like, it's like, unless we're creating an impact that is big enough as the resources that we can pull next to us. I mean, this happened with a DM on Instagram. Right?
Well, just saying, hey, I saw that you're at the conference. We use your product. I'd love to say hi. That was literally it.
And it was literally like, we're on the same battle. Like, it took a second for us to see that we're on the same team. We just didn't know that we exist.
Within like 2 minutes, you were like, you need to be on the podcast with me. And I was like, okay. That was literally like, in the first 2 minutes of, you're like, hey, tell me about what you do. And, you know, a big part of where Mendi comes in. So with autism, I mean, using the Mendi is such an amazing at-home tool. And I talk to patients about it. I talk to whoever I'm seeing, and I'm like, you don't understand where this is now and how incredible it is and where it's about to go. Because I know the input I have for where it's about to go. And it's also an insanely incredible and talented team that already has so many things lined up. And it matches so beautifully with what I know my purpose is. I know that I have developed this skill set and been surrounded by incredible doctors, including the ones I work with in my office. It's not just me. We have an unbelievably talented team. And I have this skill set because my purpose is to help these humans have a more balanced brain and a healthier brain, because the outcome of that in consciousness and in reality is going to be a world of humans with a more balanced brain, a healthier brain, making better decisions for a better world, right? If people aren't getting pissed off all the time, their left prefrontal's out of control, It's going to be a lot better calm conversations, conscious conversations. That's pretty badass that I have a skill set to facilitate that.
Less fighting, less shootings, less stabbings, less road rage,
well,
less,
and the
less
study
children
with Mendi,
getting
right?
the shit beaten out of them by their parents. We've been through that. Like, you know.
Yeah.
I think of things in a very similar way as like the everything starts at consciousness.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's been said. I think it was Andrew Breitbart that said politics is downstream of culture. I thought, oh, that's true, right? Well, what's upstream of that? And if you keep going upstream through all the different facets of the human experience, the very top of that is consciousness, right? And how do we experience and express consciousness? Through the brain. Or, you know, in other ways through the body, but primarily through the brain.
It's a big part of it. And my spiritual studies, I think, are what allowed me to excel the way I did, despite having autism and ADHD, because I had such deep spiritual practices, and those often are very whole brain or right brain. So it would get me through these times where I might have just not been able to make it through otherwise, which is pretty cool.
Well, that's funny that Moha, you know, took the girl who was eating in the library and was like, hey, you should be on podcast and be on stage and put yourself out there. So congratulations. I know for people that are more introverted, it's difficult.
It's a lot.
It's much more of a push. And you think about, you know, kind of to your point, Moha, you have, you know, God bless everyone and their gifts and their message, but you have people that are just blessed with the gift of being having charisma and being extroverted, but maybe don't have that much expertise about the topics they're sharing, right? You know, this is so prevalent on social media where, wow, this person's really engaging, intriguing, but maybe don't have, you know, as you do, like in your clinical practice, right? Just, I'm sure, dozens and hundreds of cases and refining your skill set so that it can really help people. So it makes perfect sense that it's time to scale that despite the discomfort of putting yourself out there.
It's so funny. We were talking about it yesterday because we were having dinner with Hannah at this place called Ember. It's great, by the way, if you haven't been. Ember, right?
Ember Kitchen, yeah.
Ember Kitchen is really good.
Oh, it did?
And so we're there, and you know, Hannah's a neuroscientist, and we're sitting there and we're talking. And I'm giving them like kind of like the blueprint of where I see Mendi going, and you know that my dream is that over the next few years people don't have to pay for it. Everybody gets it for free. It's very affordable as it is, but my whole thing is that it should be inclusive to everybody. So what I was telling them is that I am the Trojan horse to get them all in there. I'm like, if we can put together 50, 100 of the best, you know, scientists, doctors, just absolute, we're very, very, very science-based. We can put them all there. And the doors that I can open, because people want to talk about bullshit like whatever, the six-pack or the jet setting or whatever, that's great, because then I can bring a Hannah in and she can talk about, you know, the science. And it's a beautiful way, and it's just, that's how we can inform the world. And so there's a plan around that, but I love how you're expressing my limitations in a way that is flattering to me. But it's, to be honest, I just think that I'm very lucky, and many times I don't even find these amazing people. She found me, I didn't find her. I can't even take credit for that.
And I don't send messages on Instagram.
Yeah,
like, that is not a thing.
You found me because Josh brought you.
Yeah.
So Josh, like, you understand, it's like, I literally can take credit for nothing. I'm literally
But he's in flow state. I was like, that's why.
Yeah.
You're just...
Well, that's actually a really good way to put when he says it's just easy. It's easy. You just do.
Because he's in flow state. It's magnetizing. Like, I never send TMs to people, but I was like, do it. This is an opportunity. I'm like, what opportunity? I'm having that conversation.
I do. Like, I met Ben Rain through a DM. I showed you yesterday. I do that. I scaled fish brain on DM.
For sure.
Yeah, I love the correlation between it's easy and flow state, because when you're in flow state, regardless of like what skill is flowing, it is easy. When it's hard is when we're not in flow state. And you know, speaking of something like Mendi, when our brain is not functional, good luck finding your flow state.
Oh, for sure.
In whatever area of talent you exceed.
Like that frontal, prefrontal, absolutely.
Yeah. I want to back up a bit though. You guys okay on time? Can I do my thing? Okay, good. Yesterday I had an interview with a brilliant man, and he only had an hour, and I was over here sweating bullets with my iPad. Like, no, I have so many more questions. It's just, you know, it's why the show sometimes is longer. I don't want anyone to leave and feel like, oh man, we could have talked about. But I want to go back to Libya. I'm so curious about just being somewhere in a time of war. Is it what I imagine, that you're hearing, gunfire down the street and a bomb a couple miles away shaking the building? Like what was it like in terms of its emotional impact?
Closer than that. So so it's basically, just think about that you're at your most stressed constantly, and that becomes the default for you. So when you go to sleep, so the first thing that Mendi helped me with a lot, and the reason why I took the job, because I was retired before Mendi, so I became an investor, and then they asked me to take the job, and I took it, was because I had really bad nightmares from that time in Libya. It's because you are in a state, and even though like you said, I'm highly functional, and I've always been highly functional, but I've always had a lot of emotional regulation problems and a lot of anxiety, which were not made any better, obviously. And it's basically like your body is in a constant state of stress. It's like you've got constant whiplash. I don't know how to explain it. You guys would be better at explaining it.
I've had a similar feeling, and not to diminish wartime experience, but in dysfunctional relationships in my past, experienced that. Just nonstop fight.
It's probably physically very similar.
System. It's just vagal
there
system.
You go.
Yeah.
Where you're just locked.
Like there's no like, I'm gonna go relax for a few minutes. No, you're not.
That doesn't exist.
No.
Yeah.
So you get stuck in that. So ventral vagal is like green light. You want to engage socially. You feel good. You're calm. And the next one over is spinal sympathetic, and that's fight or flight. And then that's when your amygdala is going crazy. We call it the asshole amygdala in the office, because you might be 5 years out and you hear something and it's going to set you off as though you're there, because that amygdala is like, holy shit, this isn't safe, right?
Right.
And how do you calm the amygdala? There's 2 ways that you can calm it. Vestibular system, right? So you run. I need to go for a run. Humans will get that, right? I need to run. The kiddos that can't run, we spin them. We do some sort of vestibular thing. The other way for a brain that's healthy enough is prefrontal activation.
Oh, wow.
And that is where Mendi is gold. Absolute gold.
So that explains why he's having insomnia and PTSD.
And then
my
you
nightmares
work with
went
that
away.
Mendi.
Like my nightmares just went away, and I was like, fuck, this is...
Yes.
Why doesn't... And my reaction was, why doesn't everybody know about this? Why did I find out about this shit when I'm 40 years old and I'm a multimillionaire and I'm in Sweden? What chance does a 15-year-old girl in Bangladesh have? She's fucked. There's a girl with my same issues in Bangladesh. It's my obligation to make sure that people don't go 40 years of bad relationships and bad fights and street fights and all sorts of shit.
Throwing people's head in the urinal.
Throw people's head in the urinal.
Little inside story he told me.
And And even to this day, like I will do a Mendi, like if I'm stressed, it'll just take away the jitters. Like it'll just take away that anxiety. It'll just put me in in a state where I'm just like, there's an immediate effect along with the long lasting effects and all that stuff. But for me, it was just like no, like you said, like no different than going and training, going for a run, lifting some weights, whatever. Like the Mendi will really just, it will just almost like align everything, just make everything be balanced. It's like, for me, it's like my day is a very messy room. It's like just like with a bunch of like hoarding and shit, and it's just, I'll do that. It's like, it's just clean. And then I can function a lot better, and I'm just a nicer person to be with. Like I'm not an asshole if you say something to me, like, you understand, like I'm not as irritable, I'm not as, and it's always a work in progress, right? But it's, Libya, that's what it was. It was, imagine that I think for the average person that can't relate maybe to levels of abuse that we've been through, or to war or something like that, perhaps like just being at your scariest moment watching a horror movie, and then you're stuck in that moment, and then you expand that for months and months and months, and that's your life. That moment of being that tense, it's like, you're going to sleep, your heart is racing because you hear a sound and you're expecting the worst, right? So that's, I probably didn't explain that very well, but I think you get it.
I get the picture, yeah. In terms of frequency and duration, so you're having these nightmares after spending this time
every day
in wartime Libya every day. when you discovered the Mendi, how often were you using it, and what period of time before you started to see like, wow, I slept last night and had no nightmares?
I remembered my dreams the first night, and they were pleasant. Like, it was just like, I was like, oh fuck. And I yeah, it was like, it wasn't me getting stabbed and waking up, you know.
Yeah.
And then I remember it just kept getting better to the point where I remember saying like, oh, like I have nightmares like once a month. I can't even remember, like, I don't know if I've had nightmares once or twice this year. Like, so it's so, which is probably normal for like the average person that hasn't been through war and hasn't had the childhood I had and all that. Like, so it's, it's incredible what it will do. And my issue with talking about it is that it just sounds like it's too good to be true. And that's what people need to understand. That's why I need, you know, the Hannahs and the Melissas of the world, and, you know, to explain the science so that people can land it and understand that, oh, it actually does make sense, because that's how the brain works, right? And, you know, as somebody that's never been very interested in biohacking, like I'm not nearly a gadget nerd, like anything comparable to you, you know, or I've never been interested in studying really, except for things that I really cared about. Like, I'm a nerd on sports, like, you know. But now, to me, it's fascinating that I can have access to these experts and I can have conversations with them. I don't have to read the books. I can actually tap into somebody.
And that's my method too.
Yeah, so that's.
I'll open up.
Bring the living book.
Exactly.
I'll look up something on PubMed and I'm just like, oh, I'm just going to interview someone on this that knows how to read this and
find the author and bring them over.
Exactly. Yeah, that's my hack. I want to let everyone know you can find everything we're talking about today at lukestorey.com/Mendi, MENDI, lukestorey.com/Mendi for your show notes, because we're going to get into some of the science and things like that. So,
and everybody can download the app for free, Mendi, you know, on the App Store, Mendi. You know, they don't even need a device with it, right, to get a lot of value. And that's what we're doing over the next 6 months, like Melissa said, is really exciting, the stuff that we're inputting. And but obviously, to do the training, you would need a device. But just go ahead and download the app.
And for the device, for those watching the video, it's this little headband right here, which I can't put on because I have a headset on. But this is what I had on this morning. Okay, I've done a few shows, at least 2 or 3 devoted to neurofeedback, with the QEEG, like the full-on thing. One of them was 3 years ago at BioCybernaut in Sedona, Arizona, where I went and did like a 5-day training. It's like, yeah, I don't know. They take your phone away. And then you're doing your training in a dark booth with no windows, and you have no idea. You kind of know what day it is because you know when you walked in there, but you have no idea what time it is, and it's this whole thing. It's very intense, like alpha training, basically. Yeah. So I did a show with Dr. Jim Hart and Andrew Hill in Los Angeles from Peak Brain Institute. So some of the older listeners will be familiar with neurofeedback. Many people listening, probably the vast majority, are like, what the hell is that? So maybe you could just give us kind of an overview on neurofeedback as a genre, and then we'll talk about how it's been adopted in a much more accessible way with the Mendi.
Yeah, so we do QEEG in the office. Oh, okay. So I'm very familiar with that, and we have people do neurofeedback with QEEG. So that's, I mean,
what system do you use? Is it
BrainMaster?
Oh, okay, cool.
I don't know if you're familiar with that one. So, I mean, I've seen that for a while, and then we got the Mendi, and I was like, hold on a second. This is so easy. It's so easy. And a lot of the people, if they have sensory issues too, you're putting all the goop in their hair all the time, every day. And there's a lot of value to doing the full QEEG for someone who has a severe TBI and they need, you know, maybe they need more temporal lobe or they need something else going on other than just frontal. But for the average person, and that's who, you know, Mendi is really marketing to right now, working the frontal, prefrontal lobe area it's like a dam, right? Our prefrontal lobes are like a dam. The majority of the brain is excitatory, and so it spends most of its energy inhibiting. So if that dam starts to break down, you have water rushing through of impulse control issues, anger issues, sleep issues, these different things that come through, right? So when you're using Mendi and you're strengthening that prefrontal cortex, you're strengthening that dam and you're building that wall back up, and that's neuroplasticity, and that's why it's something you need to repeat typically when you're trying to build neuroplasticity, it's a higher frequency at the beginning. And then you can, go to maybe 10 minutes a day or whatever it is. Maybe instead of 2 sessions, you're doing 1 session, something like that. But that's kind of how to look at it, right? When we're looking at that prefrontal cortex of, we need to keep that strong, and that's for life. That's not just at certain periods. We want that into 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond. We want to have that integrity in that prefrontal cortex to be able to go through life in a regulated manner and in a calm manner, and be able to have conversations with family members that might otherwise be triggering, and being able to keep yourself calm, that type of thing.
I mean, living life with less reactivity in and of itself is a massive win.
It's a massive one. It changes the world.
Yeah.
Really. And that's why, I am oddly obsessed with this thing. It's not oddly, because I know why, but I'm literally this just matches what my purpose, my goal, my vision, and it makes it so accessible in a way that I've never seen with a tool. And I mean, I've seen a lot of the tools, all the neurofeedback stuff, whatever. It's great, it has value, but it's very expensive. It's very limiting for people to be able to do. And this is just golden.
And difficult to do at home. I mean, I know some systems, you can buy a PC laptop.
It's thousands of dollars, though. Yeah.
To unpack neurofeedback a little bit more, and maybe you can explain this with more eloquence, but the way I think about it is with an emphasis, I mean, obviously the neurology part of it, but the feedback, right? Where you're experiencing something sensory, like you're looking at a screen, like in the case of traditional neurofeedback, or in the Mendi, I'm looking at the app, and through your visual stimuli, your brain is then responding to what you're seeing, and it's behaving according to what your goal is, right? So there's a feedback loop between your perception and the brain waves or different things, or the blood flow, in this case in the prefrontal cortex.
Exactly.
That's happening. Is that?
Yeah, pretty much. And it's reinforcing that. It's reinforcing whatever you want to have happen, which is more oxygenated blood flow to the prefrontal cortex. It reinforces that with ball going up and the stars and the nice noise and everything.
So when I'm looking at the app, and I wish I could show it, on the video, I could just do one. But when I'm looking at the app, it looks like a very basic video game. Like most neurofeedback, it's not like World of Warcraft or something, right? It's just super simple, and there's kind of a little wave form, and there's a little kind of yin-yang looking ball that kind of goes up and down and then makes stars when it's going up, and a little ding, ding, ding. And so what I perceive to be happening when I use Mendi is that the more my brain's doing what myself and Mendi want it to do, it's getting stimuli because it's going higher and going ding, 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 and that's encouraging the brain to get more oxygenated blood into the front of the brain. Is that kind of what's happening?
Yeah, and it's just reinforcing that pattern, and that's how you build neuroplasticity.
Cool. Yeah. Cool.
And we are building, by the way, more more games, and that's one of the things that are coming, more exciting. Maybe not World of Warcraft type stuff, but a lot more games. But the way that I look at it is I've been bench pressing since I was 14. It's it works. If it works, it doesn't really need disco lights.
For sure.
I don't need disco
and that'll
lights on the
just,
squat.
from my perspective, that'll cause neurological fatigue, which we don't want.
Yeah.
We don't want it to be too much.
Yeah. So everything's got to be, and everything that we build, just so you know, our CPO is a neuroscientist. Our head of content is a neuroscientist. It's we're very, very science.
You got all the good nerds.
And they're all amazing people with a moral compass that is unshakable. You've met some of them already, and I'm
just incredible.
But that's the thing. We're not just doing things. Bells and whistles and hype is not really what we're going for. We've gone the slow and steady route because we wanted to do things right, and we're not about making. I'll give you an example. I turned down the sale before we launched on Kickstarter of 30,000 devices to one of the big healthcare companies in the U.S. that wanted to give 30,000 Mendi devices as a CSR project to at-risk youth. So basically, kids that are in gangs, gang members, and kids with issues, with problems, and the intentions were good, but many times good intentions lead to poor results, and we had to say no to that. That was I said no, because what that's going to do is it's just going to give us a bunch of noisy data. For us, it's about learning how we can help. Like, for example, understanding what she does is seeing how these kids react to the training, et cetera, so that we can. I remember one of the things that she told me on the call, she was like, well, there's something that could be done better. I'm like, perfect, let's get it done. And she's like, well, what if that's bad for business? I'm like, I don't give a shit. This is not, clearly I'm a terrible CEO. Like, I'm horrible for business.
Clearly not, but
okay. But it's like, let's do what is right,
Yeah.
and the sooner we do it, the better. And that's why we want all these scientists and we want all these communicators. We want everybody giving their opinions and giving their feedback so that we can build something that can help. The Luke Stories of the world and
My brain needs a lot of help. I've put this thing
got
through
you.
hell over the years. Well, to your point of democratizing this brain health, right? I mean, that's the unfortunate thing about a lot of the great technology, like those, more extensive neurofeedbacks and the biocharger and all these things. I mean, you're talking $2, $3, $4, $5, $10, $15, $25,000 for a thing. It's like, cool. There's a very small percentage of people that can afford to see a practitioner or to have something like that in their house. This thing's like $300, which I have to admit, in the beginning, when Josh first introduced me to you, and then he's like, I got a Mendi, and I looked it up, and I kind of thought, just because the world I'm in and the people that I interview and whatnot, when it was only $300, I was like, it probably doesn't really do that much because it's only $300, which is a really bad way to think about things. But getting to know you a bit more and understanding what your long-term goal is, I mean, obviously, if from a business perspective, your margins allow you to still become a profitable company at $300 retail. No one in the consumer base knows that. You could have charged $1,200 and no one would know the difference.
And there's a lot of companies out there and there's a lot of drugs out there where they could sell them for a tenth of what the price is. They just don't, because they can't charge that. And it just becomes, it becomes a moral question.
Well, it's also, and I'm no master businessman by any stretch, but thinking about long game and like what your ultimate goals are. I mean, whether it's to make a bunch of money while helping people, I mean, just say, like, on a very positive note, yeah, you want to help a bunch of people and you want to make a bunch of money. I think that making something that is valid and really works and has the science to back it more accessible to more people ultimately is going to bring a bigger financial gain than just trying to take all the money right now. You know what I'm saying? It's like a short-term, it's a short-term plan. It's like, oh, let's get this small section of people to pay $1,200 versus your ultimate goal, as you stated, like, let's have this covered by insurance and completely democratize it so that it's free for everyone.
100%. And it's a relative term, like how much is a bunch of money, right? And another thing, so that's why we turned down the sale of these 30,000 devices, which would have been $9 million in cash, which is great for a little startup, right? But we said no, because what we want is we need people that actually want the Mendis and that are going to use them. We need highly motivated users so that we can build the best products. If I give 30,000 Mendis to people that are, it's like giving treadmills to people that don't want to use them. They're going to put them under the bed and the data is going to tell us that, hey, it doesn't work. It doesn't help you get in shape. It doesn't, that's, for us, it was about picking people that use it, run tests, have an open dialogue, transparent communication with our users, and also with the scientific community, just opening up to criticism. And that's what's led to us being in this stage now where we actually can collaborate with people that are, the hardcore neuroscientists, the people from the Stanfords and the Princetons of the world, and, doctors, but also at the same time, we can kind of like bridge that gap and start talking about people that are more like in the spiritual world and all that, and just find these bridges, like a lot of these biohackers and stuff, and we can have this discussion. It's like, why is it that this person feels better? My problem with science, or like a lot of scientists, was that a lot of scientists do science for the sake of science, but not science to impact people. Like, they'll do research for the sake of research. It's like notches on their belt. It's not really because they're trying to get to, over a technicality, they'll throw out something that could have helped a ton of people. Whereas for me, it's like, okay, let's look at it, let's analyze it, let's be open-minded, let's get the hardcore scientists, let's get the practitioners, the neurofeedback people, the neuroscientists, the doctors, the psychologists. Everybody looks at this problem together and let's figure out how we can help people. And without over-promising, without telling people, oh, use this one time and it's gonna fix your depression. you know, because we know it will help people with depression, but, you know, there is not one thing that's going to fix everything magically. Like, that's not how the world works. Like, not even plant medicine will do that, where you just take it and you're done. You know, everything is figured out. It's like everything requires work. And
that right there is a really good point. I know you're not a big plant medicine guy, but when I first started working in that realm, I had so much benefit, and it was so transformative that I thought anyone who's ever ventured into that practice would have had the same results. And I started meeting people that were still really screwed up people,
yes.
that have done a lot of psychedelics.
Yes.
Not that I'm not, you know, in my own ways, but I mean, quantifiably, my life changed dramatically. I became much more healthy emotionally and mentally, you know, as a result of that. But yeah, there's integration, right? So it's like someone might use the Mendi, just like someone might go do an ayahuasca ceremony. And there might be some changes in your psyche, but then you are left with the responsibility of actualizing those changes and actually acting on them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Integrating them.
And not only that, but I just hate the concept of either or. Like, you can, there's many things. I'm not saying like, okay, your life is fucked up, you need to start exercising, period, you're done. You go to the gym, you lift weights. I mean, that's a good thing, but you lift weights, you do Mendi, maybe you do the plant medicine, maybe you do, there's a lot of different things. There's different layers to improving people's lives. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to make one of them accessible, you know, and to do it science-based, and something that is, for people like me, the changes are life-changing, you know. And everybody needs to go on their own journey, and everybody needs to see, and there's different people that react to it differently. And a lot of the knowledge that I have over right lobe and left lobe and the differences and all this stuff, and I've been researching it, and I talked to the science team about it, was over a conversation with her. So for me, it's just fascinating that if we all come together, we can accelerate science so much. And these things piss a lot of people off, but it doesn't really matter to me.
Good.
Well, and what I tell patients all the time, because parents will come in and they're like, we've done all of these therapies and we hardly saw any results. And I'm like, well, you didn't get to the core, right? The brain's controlling everything. So if you can get that figured out, so if someone wants to go do plant medicine with their prefrontal cortex is shit, how are they actually going to make it through processing all of that when they come back out of it? But you pair that up, that's pretty cool.
Or even you follow up normal neurofeedback with something you can take at home. You could. There's so many things.
There's endless options with this, for sure.
With going back to the neurofeedback, it just occurred to me, with the Mendi, we're measuring blood flow, but with traditional neurofeedback, we're measuring electrical activity.
Brainwaves.
Brainwaves. So what's the difference fundamentally between the results you get, or what one subjectively experiences working with the blood flow in this case versus the electrical activity? I mean, is it still, you're giving feedback to the brain and encouraging it to do what you want it to do in two different ways?
I think it's
ultimately it's like
different.
The same goal?
Yeah, there's the same goal because you want a healthier brain, but when you're looking at brain waves, like I can look at a QEEG and someone, never told me that they had a head injury and they've got this hot spot, and I can say, oh, are you sure you never hit your head? Oh, actually, when I was 12, I fell off a ladder or something. That happens all the time. So when you're doing the traditional QEEG neurofeedback, I might target that more. But again, that's different. That's someone coming in with a brain injury, really severe symptoms, something like that. That's different than optimizing prefrontal cortex for like a better life, better regulation. It's kind of two different things. They're both gonna get you some sort of outcome, but it really depends what you're looking for. But also I love to put people, like they do the QEEG, the traditional QEEG, that doesn't mean we don't do Mendi with them, because their brain is gonna be healthier to be able to handle doing Mendi and get better results from doing Mendi.
Got it.
That's what I've observed clinically.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And the prefrontal cortex is related to our emotional responses to life?
More like the impulsiveness, anger, sleep issues, more of that. The the emotional part, there's a lot of different pieces that have to do with the emotional part, but it basically has to do with the regulation of those things.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Better decision making and more
Yes.
control, more
Yes.
agency. So the executive function. So it's, for example, when we're talking about things like addiction, which we touched up on, I mean, that's what will literally give you the ability, the physical ability to put down the bottle of vodka.
So you might still be having the emotions, but then you'll have the agency over it
right.
to be able to make a decision. Yes.
Right. Oh, that's
Yes.
good. Maybe that's why I like this thing so much. I'm a dyed in the wool addict, man. You know, it's like I quit doing drugs and started taking supplements. It's people point that out. I'm like, yeah, no shit. It's not lost on me. Like look in my cabinet down there. Follow me around with like a hidden camera all day and be like, you kind of act like an addict. Well, yeah. But the compulsiveness and impulsiveness and all of that, I mean, it's so important for every person, regardless of what their background is, to be able to, sure, you have these emotions, you have crazy thoughts, but what do you do with it? Are you able to take a breath and pause before you yell at your kid or flip off the driver or even spiral down into more depressive thoughts?
Yeah, rumination. So people just overthink things, like you have a breakup, whatever. It's like, oh, and then you start to overthink this and your life becomes this black void, like this hole that never ends, and then how do you stop that? How do you swipe that away, kind of,
Does the Mendi and its ability to bring more oxygenated blood into the prefrontal cortex help with rumination, with overthinking?
100%.
Yeah? Cool. That used to be a huge problem for me. Less so nowadays, but maybe that I've been using the Mendi a lot. How long ago did we meet? I'm so bad at time.
When was it? I flew in from Costa Rica. Was
3 months ago or something?
It might have been like the beginning of the year. It might be like 6 months ago.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, to my point. So that's how long I've been using Mendi.
Yeah.
I think
That's
we
great.
reached out to you guys within a couple of weeks after that. Y'all sent me one. So, and I went ham when I first got it. I was like 7 days a week, 15 minutes, non-negotiable, and then. It's like anything too, you start feeling better and then you kind of like, well, I don't need to do the thing.
Exactly, that's the thing. And this is one of those things.
Compliance
people are like,
factor.
oh, how long do you have to use it? I'm like, well, do you go to the gym, get a six-pack, and then you're done training for the rest of your life? Yeah, now it's just, cookies and sitting around the couch and never taking a walk for the rest of my life. No, obviously that's not how things work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You use it or you lose it.
So in terms of benefits that you're seeing clinically, feedback that you're getting from your client base, what are the main things? You mentioned your nightmares, so insomnia, depression, anxiety, addiction. Can we unpack those a little bit, and anything else that I missed?
Impulse control is a big one.
Do you find the impulse control is more quantifiable in kids because they're generally more impulsive, or the kids that you're dealing with are even more compulsive than other kids?
A lot of adults have impulse control issues. They do, and they might not recognize
I discovered
it.
this at 40, so.
Yeah. I mean, it could be food. I mean, food is a big one for people with impulse control issues.
It is for me.
And even healthy food. That doesn't mean you don't have an impulse control issue just because you're eating something healthy.
Right.
Yeah.
My impulse control issue, and I know you have a candy room at home, which is totally bizarre. Mine's like sweets at night.
Yeah.
Maybe I should set the intention for my Mendi practice to help with that. And and there's like the devil and the angel on the shoulder. It's like, Luke, I just lost 20 pounds recently. I don't know what was happening, but I ballooned up. For me, I was going into the Orca range and lost a few pounds, and then when it happened, and I did alter my eating a bit, things obviously worked out a little bit more, but still there'd be that angel devil where it's 10 o'clock at night, I'm like, you should totally be winding down and going to bed, but I'm like, my wife does not have impulse control with sugar, so she buys these like gluten-free cookie dough packets, and if I know they're in the fridge, dude, I cannot stop myself. I just can't, like literally.
Well, this will help you.
I'm like, don't do it, Luke, don't do it, and there I am, I'm like, I'll just take 2 out of the bag. That's not that much sugar or whatever, right? And next thing you know, I crush 6 of them.
Yeah.
I almost wish my wife got mad when I crush all her sugar stash, but she doesn't. So then I'll be ready to eat the last one. I'm like, she's gonna get mad. I'm like, no, actually she's not. She never has said it once, like, don't eat all my shit. and that doesn't help. But maybe the Mendi will help me.
100%. I mean, it's just such a, yeah, it's like a waterfall effect of benefits on your prefrontal cortex. I mean, we can talk about things like Alzheimer's. I mean, cognitive decline, like we're on our way there. You know, it's like, you know, how do you fight that? You make your brain stronger. Just like, I think an analogy, and I love your dam analogy. I've been thinking about that in the background. I love that. That makes so much sense. But the way I look at it is like, if your prefrontal cortex is like, you know, when you see like a very old person that hasn't trained a lot and they got really flabby like triceps, like that's your prefrontal cortex. Like it can't really carry bags. Like it can't really carry, like you understand, it can't really, you know, go and do the chores. Whereas if you strengthen that tricep, I'm talking about the prefrontal cortex, then you're, you know, you can carry your kids and carry the shopping bags and do whatever it is that you need to do. Push the car if it breaks down and deal with those everyday problems in life. So it's, yeah, I think it's about strength and resilience, you know, across the board. But I mean, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that we hear that are writing us things that, you know, like I got off X or Y medication, you know, depression, whatever. And we're not anti-pharma. We're not telling people to get off their medication. We're not telling people to, like, understand. But what we're saying is put this into your daily habits and you are going to see benefits and then go from there. Like that's the best thing that a person can do for themselves. And I mean, the whole concept of biohacking comes from that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Self-agency.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what appeals to me about it. I'm not that crazy about that term because I don't have a really mechanistic relationship with the body. It's more of a living, breathing, loving kind of relationship. So I don't think about hacking my body. It's kind of more partnering with it. Biopartnering. I don't know. I have to come up with a term that I like better. But yeah, I think, you know, it's exciting now. I think more people are learning. Yeah. Medical system's there, psychiatrist is there, therapists, like great, it's all there, and there are some wonderful and brilliant people helping people have better lives. But man, there's a lot you can do on your own if you have a little discipline.
And look at COVID. I mean, it was like half the population of the United States, for example, where we are right now, is, you know, has some sort of mental health issue that, you know, a lot of these things you could dramatically improve by yourself without getting on drugs. And again, I'm not anti-pharma, but it's like there's a lot of work that you could do. Like it's like these people that are just taking these pills so that they can keep eating the cookies, you know, the whatever. Like there's a lot of these drugs out there, but it's like, well, there's also the choice of eating less cookies and going for a walk, right? I mean, that's a drug that exists as well. You know? Yeah. So that's kind of like the approach to it.
I want to let people know, and I'll put this in the show description because I know when I listen to podcasts it's hard to remember links, but if you guys want to try out a Mendi, we've got 20% off for you. Go to mendi.io/discount/loop20, and the code's loop20. But we'll put that in the show description so it's just easily clickable. And I'll remind you guys that all the show notes for everything we're talking about are loopstory.com/Mendi.
One thing that I want to point out, and it's one of the reasons why I love that people like Melissa exist, and I'm so grateful for them, is so the word Mendi comes from the verb to mend. And that's really no different to what she has been doing for years at her clinic. She's been mending people's brains. She's been mending people's lives. She's been mending these drowned kids' lives and all these things. And basically is how do we get a version of that? Because we will never be able to recreate Melissa. That's impossible. Technology will never be able to recreate her, but what's a supplement to that we could make available to everybody? And that's kind of like the spirit of what we do.
I love it. Mendi is a great name. It reminds me of making amends. You know, when you make amends to someone, you're repairing your...
Easier to do that when your prefrontal cortex works.
Yeah. You can't admit you're wrong if your prefrontal cortex is shut down. You're always right and everyone else is wrong.
Yeah.
Another application to this I wanted to talk about was focus. ADD, ADHD, all this kind of stuff. I've never been diagnosed with those, but on some days it's really hard to sit at my computer and do the thing I'm supposed to do. What have you seen clinically or in your own subjective experience, Moha, that indicates that Mendi is supporting for focus?
You start with that.
So my speaking personally as a user, my ability to focus has so dramatically improved. It's like I'm just way more present than, you know, people that have known me for a long time, they really see the difference. Like I wouldn't even be able to like literally just do a normal job. Like I literally talk about the fact that I wouldn't be hired for any position at Mendi. Like literally, I just don't have, you know, I've never had the capacity to do any of these things, right? So it's like I've had to kind of like build a skill set where I could be worthy of a job and give myself a job, because as far as focus, yeah, I mean, ADHD is a huge one for us. I mean, the help that kids are getting, I mean, they're just, anybody, you know, you could just go see a doctor and get a prescription for ADHD in a second. Yeah, the technology curve is really steep. There's a lot of information happening at all times. The younger generations are having it even harder than we are. I mean, there's going to be a big crisis showing up in the future. The next generation is headed for a lot of issues. My buddy Dave Asprey sent me this study that was fascinating that showed that a healthy teenager today has a poorer mental health from a psychiatric ward teenager in the 50s. Just think about that.
Whoa.
So that is basically, and remember the difference, kind of like the technology curve from the 50s to now is not nearly as fast at what it's going to be over the next 20 years. Like that is accelerating dramatically. Like what we've seen in the last 15 years is unheard of. You know, I've said this many times, the fact that a little kid can't go to the bathroom and take a shit without watching 6 TikToks and sending 15 messages, and you know, it's just the layers of behavior that have been added through. It's just going to pile on these already humongous numbers and these humongous problems. And obviously nobody sees the individual. Nobody cares about me. Like nobody cares about these people. The beauty about what Melissa does is that she knows these kids, she knows these patients by name. It's like each of them matters to her. That's why it's, you know, the emotional toll it must take on you is unbelievable, and you're a fucking superhero. I've said that since I met you, and I admire you so much and people like you so much, but it's very difficult to be able to focus on each individual and give them the right amount of help. That's why they'll just throw pills at you. You could literally just go like and be like, hey, I think I might have ADHD. Yes, you do. Here's your pill. And that's basically the way that we treat all these conditions. And there's a better way. And we're gonna, you know, power our way through and make it more accessible so that people understand that. But yeah, ADHD is a very big one. That's always the very non-scientific way for me to explain things.
It's so relatable though. That's why I like it.
Melissa, what can you tell me about human neurology and the effects of these social media apps on the brain? So I've noticed subjectively, because of the way they're designed to just get you dopamine strung out, basically.
I mean, that's a huge part of it.
If I get up and get on my phone and start going through Twitter and refreshing, which I do my best not to do, but it's difficult at times. I do much better if I get up and meditate, just get myself grounded, and then I can engage in the world and have more resilience to that temptation. But if I fail to do that, and I get up and get on social media instead of doing a Mendi session, my focus is going to be shit that day, 100%. And I've noticed over the years, because unfortunately a lot of my work involves interacting with social media. It's like you're wanting to put yourself out there now. Well, I want to put myself out there, and unless you can afford to pay someone to be you as your personality and trust that they're going to do that authentically, which is very difficult, you're in the game. I have noticed, going back to the reading, I used to be actually quite a good reader and more of a reader. I could stay focused. I would read pretty dense, especially spiritual books and things that were, you know, not really exciting to read, but information that I wanted to integrate. I've noticed my reading of physical books is way worse since I've had a phone in my hand for a few years. And there's no other explanation for it, because I'm healthier, my brain's healthier. In every other quantifiable metric, I'm doing way better. Why is it that my reading is so much worse? The only thing that has changed is my relationship to technology, and specifically social media. So I know it's not good. what do you see with children or people that you work with in terms of...
It's not giving you those dopamine hits. I mean, unless you're like rewarding yourself with each page, you know, you're not getting that. And we've become accustomed to needing that, unfortunately. You know, I'm part of it. I know all of this, but I still, you know, will find myself. I know if I'm on my phone before I get out of bed in the morning, it's not good. I'm wearing out all that dopamine. Oh, for sure.
Your
for
focus
sure.
and presence is...
Absolutely. And productivity is going to be down the drain. Get up, do the shit, then look at social media if you're going to do that. But it also has to do with the vertical scrolling. And I've been saying for years, I wish that we could change. I wish there was an app on the phone that you could change, you know, TikTok to scroll from... I don't actually use TikTok. I'm assuming it scrolls vertical. Everything scrolls vertical because it's just feeding the mies and stuff along. You're just feeding that, like, beast that's just addiction. Where if you have it scrolling vertical, it's not going to feed the mies and stuff along the same way. Sorry, yeah.
Really?
So they do the vertical versus horizontal.
Bastards do it on purpose because that's how I would say.
For sure.
It's funny.
And even the colors, and then you add in blue light toxicity on top of it.
Yeah, now you're speaking my language.
Yeah.
My worst social media addiction, strangely, is Twitter, and it scrolls vertically.
They all scroll.
And what's funny is I have no followers on Twitter. No one will pay attention to me there at all. I've had Twitter for years. I have like 5,000 followers. I get no likes, no retweets. I'm just dead in the water. So I don't really try to use Twitter to express myself, but it's kind of my news feed. You know, when I want to doom scroll and see how shitty the world is, I go on Twitter to torture myself. But, you know, you can't, it's like that refreshing and a ding, ding, ding.
Absolutely.
It's like a negative neurofeedback.
So this is a really important thing because we talk about neuroplasticity, right? And it's gotten really popular. I've been doing this a long time. People thought I was loco when I was first talking about it. You can change the brain? Hell yeah, you can change the brain, right? Everyone knows that now, neuroplasticity. But there's positive neuroplasticity and there's negative neuroplasticity. And that's a really important distinction. Yikes. So you can build negative neuroplasticity in anything, really in any habit. Any habit that you don't want is negative neuroplasticity.
Like ruminating about what happened in a relationship, for example, or
you're
something.
Building neuroplasticity in that pathway, which is going to make it that much harder. You just made a super highway out of that thought.
Of negative thoughts.
Exactly. And you have to have a more powerful stimulus than that rumination for 6 months to overcome it. And that's often where people will end up in therapy or end up in something else because their mind is going down that superhighway. They have to seek something outside to break that down because you have to stop traveling down that highway to let it break down.
Wow, that is deep. That is a tweetable, which I would tweet if anyone listened to me on Twitter. Maybe you can tweet.
Do it anyway. I don't have Twitter.
No, but I mean,
maybe I do from like 10 years ago. I have no idea.
This concept of you know, deleterious neuroplasticity, right? I literally never had that thought once. I'm just like, I know something's wrong when I'm on my phone too much and I can't read a book or focus and I just feel super sketchy. But that's so interesting. We're training the negative patterns into our brain.
Yeah, it's what happens when a concept gets popular. You lose the meat of what's actually going on.
Yeah, wow, hardcore. So it would stand to reason that on those good days when I get up and set my prefrontal cortex, that's such a hard word to say. What's the acronym?
PFC.
PFC, I think I'll say PFC. When I hook up the PFC with the oxygenated blood and I'm getting the kind of neuroplasticity that we want, it makes sense that one would be more resilient to the hooks, the addiction of all of that fake stimuli, right?
You're setting yourself for success.
100%.
You're setting yourself up for success.
Yes.
Do we have anything going on in the military, in acute care, in the medical system? Are there any people that are like under a tremendous amount of stress that are using Mendi?
So we've had talks with the military, with some branches, and people from the Air Force have reached out. A lot of the UFC, for example, uses Mendi. Like there's a lot of, when it comes to PTSD, when it comes to the military, twofold. Obviously, having them be able to focus and be able to under those stressful situations, and when it's needed to be able to perform and be fully there and to be in the zone. and also the traumatic events. You know, there's a lot of veterans and a lot of different people. What we've been doing with Mendi right now is a lot of it has been B2C, but that will change into you know, B2B, which we were already doing a few big things in, but also B2G. I believe that anybody that has seen, and not only that has fought, but anybody that's been in a war zone should have access to this to naturally be able to improve their lives and supplement whatever else they're doing to be able to cope. Because, yeah, I mean, for me, it was the nightmares, and for other people, it's even worse, right? So it's, but yeah, there is a world where everybody that's in that world will have access to this. Yeah, and I think a lot of it happens here in the U.S. first.
Awesome.
I mean, China's doing some stuff as well. I believe a lot of them have different intentions on how they use technology. They're using different technologies, like, for example, again, to manipulate the focus of students, teaching them how to focus and all that. But it's more like a surveillance type situation. Yeah. I mean, it works, right? I mean, the light turns red, you know, the teacher scolds you. That teaches you how to, you know, it's a punishment reward system kind of thing, I guess. We feel that there's a more ethical way of doing that, and that everybody should have agency and control over their own stuff, and it's not a tool of manipulation.
It's voluntary, right?
Yeah.
Imagine you're a kid in school, you have in China, right, and you have ADD and you can't focus, and your social credit score goes down. And then you go buy a loaf of bread and they're like, sorry, your score fell too low. It's terrifying. That stuff just freaks me out.
Well, when you talk about like military and stuff, like, it actually eats up on me. So I get anxiety, I get stressed knowing that there's so many people that need what we have that still haven't gotten it. So it's just like, I'm thinking, you know what, if I would have started using Mendi at 35 instead of 40, what could I have achieved those 5 years? You know, how much better could I have done my fish brain journey and all these companies? Like, you understand, like, whatever, my relationships, you know, bad breakups, like all these, you know, bad decisions.
Oh my God, I'm going through.
Brother, wouldn't you kill to go
I'm
back?
going
20
through the
years
reel
later?
of how my brain used to ruin my life for me.
Imagine if you would have had the ability to make better decisions.
Right.
That's an infinitely better life.
Right, man, because it's, you know, your life is dependent obviously on your decisions and the actions you take, right? And those are motivated by thoughts and feelings that emerge within. And if you have the ability, and I think this is why meditation is so powerful, if you have the ability to be the observer of that phenomenon, there's a bit of a gap between what you're thinking and feeling and then what you do with it, right? So it sounds like this, like meditation, is giving us more of a pause, more of a gap. Someone says something that strikes you the wrong way. There's many different reactions, but two of them mainly, one of them being just immediately reacting back and wanting to punish or defend, and the other is observing, oh wow, that person just said that thing. Now I'm having this like hot sensation in my body, and I'm seeing these thoughts start to form of what I want to say to hurt them or defend myself against them, right? It's micro seconds in there, but being able to make those micro decisions and change our actions, like, have everything to do with the course of our life.
It goes back to setting yourself up for success. You could have, you know, you avoided a physical confrontation, for example, or you avoided whatever, shooting heroin. Like, you understand, like, it's these things, you know, it's very tangible what we do. Yeah. And by the way, I take no credit for it. I didn't build it. So two Swedish founders built it, namely Rickard Eklof is the one that built the technology, and Sammy was basically the first guy, and their foray into it was that they had issues and they needed it. Sammy is a deeply, deeply anxious person that went through everything, went to hell and back to find something that would help him. And that's where the genesis of Mendi started, when, you know, this genius that builds hardware, that does touch screens for Sony Ericsson and all this stuff, Rickard, walks in and he's like, oh, you could help me build this thing? And he's like, yeah, why does it cost this much money? I can build it for a lot less. And the other guy was like, you know, oh great, let's build it and let's sell it expensive. And then Rickard's a little bit of a communist. He's like, no, why that expensive? Then he brings me on, which, you know, I've been called a little bit of a communist myself. And I'm like, yeah, we even cheaper. Let's make sure everybody gets it for free by 2030, you know, and that's the path we're on. But I don't want people to wait for until 2030, to be honest, because, you know, what's going to happen in the next 7 years? You know, how many people need to die, and how many people need to get beaten up, and how many people need to do drugs that they could have avoided, and how many people need, you know, failed relationships that could have been avoided. And yeah, I think that's the thing that really eats up at me, is not moving fast enough, but doing things consciously, and having smart people that are not motivated by just make money around me, because then we can do things right. Not fast, but right. Just exactly the way that we should be doing them.
I love it. So I talked about the scoring when we first started this conversation. And I don't know if either of you are geeky enough to dive into this, or if you are, how deep. But when we're looking at the performance score, so as I said, today was a pretty good day. I got an 83. What does this 41% neural activity actually mean? What's happening with that?
Do you want to go?
You can speak to that.
Yeah, so basically that you've increased the baseline by 41%. So you've increased oxygenated blood flow in response to neural activation as you're playing the training game. So when you look at the scores and when you look at the numbers, in the app, there's a very clear explanation, but basically what it does is it's an algorithm that will reward consistency on top of your actual performance. So there's a little bit of, you know, and maybe to the people that are super black and white, like they don't want to hear this, but it's almost like, you know, you get an extra point for going to the gym, even if you don't do the best squatting session in the world, because what you want to do is you want to reward consistency, because consistency, it really adds up. It's the little things that you do that will really change your life. It's not that one big thing you do right now, right? It's the little things that you do day in and day out. Those are the things that are going to prevent conditions, that are going to improve things, that are going to improve your life, that are going to improve your how every day looks for you. So that's what it is. It's basically, it's a combination of your actual performance plus your consistency and your commitment.
Got it. Okay, cool. And before I forget, I just want to compliment, I know you weren't the engineer that worked on this, but I want to compliment and just pass this along to your geeks in the factory or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean that in the best sense.
In Sweden.
Dude, I find there's a huge issue with most wearables that sync, that they're really hard to sync. It's a pain in the ass. I mean, so many people, I'm so grateful they have, but they've sent me their technology, something like a Mendi, some kind of wearable. And you're like, cool, download the app, make an account, turn on the Bluetooth thing, sync, won't sync, forgets it. You come the next day, can't connect, and I just throw them in the trash. It's like so frustrating. So that's one thing that I've actually really enjoyed about this, is it's super easy to use. Click the on button, open the app, connects every single time instantly, no problem. And for those listening too, one of my concerns, and listeners, long-time listeners will know, one of my concerns is always EMF exposure. So there's a lot of great technologies that come out, you know, a sauna or something, right? Oh, saunas are great for you. Well, you measure them with an EMF meter and you're getting fried with all kinds of different frequencies. Not good. Now there's companies that do it better than others, but in the wearable space, that's always been challenging for me, because I don't want to put stuff on my body, especially on my brain, that has EMF. This is actually the first one, because I know it has to have Bluetooth in order to work, because the device is talking to the app in real time. It's not like recording data and then uploading it to the app, right? This is the only one that I've actually been like, you know what, I don't care about the Bluetooth. It's 15 minutes a day.
Yeah.
And honestly, I've been at EMF testers in here, and just my phone sitting 2 feet away from me for an hour as I watch TV or something is way more radiation than I would ever get from 15 minutes of Bluetooth. But I want to let people know, you know, if they buy this thing and they're like, wait, Luke, is the EMF guy, it has Bluetooth? Personally, I ain't worried about it at all. It's a cost to benefit ratio.
Yeah.
It's like drinking a great, I was talking to you earlier about a canned drink that has natural flavors, you know, and some natural flavors are, I'm sure, more artificial and toxic than others. I don't really care if something has natural flavors or citric acid or whatever that might not be optimal, if the net benefit by far exceeds that, you know. So I like the connectivity, and I like that it's only 15 minutes or even shorter. I just happen to pick the longest sessions, but that's how the app works. And kudos to whoever designed it so that it doesn't frustrate the shit out of me.
Yes, so for the connectivity thing.
You know what I'm talking about?
Okay,
You work with these technologies all the time.
So multiple times a week, I struggling with some kind of Bluetooth something, and I always make a joke, I have to go get one of the younger doctors to like figure it out. But the amount of time, I just won't do it. I'm like, we're not doing that today. And I've literally not once ever had an issue with Mendi, ever. And that is another reason why I will grab it, because I know it's gonna work.
Yeah, for you it's even worse because like when I'm trying to connect some device, some wearable, it's just annoying and frustrating to me. But you're under the pressure of like having a client in there, you know?
Oh, for sure. I have like the parents and they're like, we're paying you how much? And you're sitting here trying to figure out.
You're fumbling around like, oh, I think it'll connect.
For sure. I know. I like grab one of my texts. I'm like, okay, you come over and figure this out while I continue. But it actually is a really difficult thing because there is some great stuff that just is
and it comes back to what you know, everybody in Stockholm and Sweden, they'll be hearing this and they'll love hearing this, and I'm sure they'll say thank you. But that's the thing, is that we built a clinical grade FNIRS device. It's a clinical grade functional near-infrared spectroscopy device that could have been sold way more expensive. It's just that there was no need to. You know, we're not in the business of milking as much money from users as possible. We're in the business of giving, you know, a single mom with 4 kids, you know, something that can help them without her having to worry about not making rent. Like, that's kind of like the approach, right? But yeah, I appreciate that. It's a very well built device.
It makes me glad that I don't have to throw it in the trash because I get so frustrated. Because when shit won't connect, I don't know, maybe I need to do Mendi more and be more patient.
Not be as frustrated.
Yeah, like it happens in my car all the time because when I go on long drives, I'll turn off all the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth in my car because it's just off the charts EMF. And then the next day I won't know where I'm going, so I want to see my Waze on the dash. So I turn the Wi-Fi and all that back on. Phone never connects, so if anyone at BMW is listening, get your shit together so we can
contact the people
we can
Mendi.
turn it on and off easier. So that was the neural activity. Then the next part of the score is control, and as I said, mine today was a whopping 43 seconds. What does that mean?
Which is great. I mean, there's people that can. I have a buddy of mine, Mikey, and his mom can literally do like 150 seconds, 200. Like, I mean, these are just, we have different brains. Like, our brains are very different. I can't there's no way that I can compete with somebody. Like I was just chatting with Kevin Durant a couple of hours ago, and you know, he's 7 feet tall. He's way better at some shit than I am. Like, there's no way we can, that's how the brains are. Like, if I'm comparing my way of playing basketball to Kevin Durant's, I'm fucked. Like, there's no way. And I think you can explain it a little bit better, but control is how long you are able to maintain your focus. And what you want to do is you want to hold it there for as long as possible, and you want to train it, you know, so that you can control the ball at will. And that's something that takes a lot of work. For some people, get it very quickly. Some people like me, it takes a long time for them to get really good at it. And I'm not really good at it.
When you're watching the ball on the app, this is one thing I've wondered, and I'm sure some of these answers are like in the FAQ of the app, so forgive me for not just reading that, but you know, we can share it with everyone here. I'm always a bit confused as to how much effort to put in. Like, do I want to like get my temples engaged and really like try to focus really hard on the ball, or just chill? I've kind of rested on more just like relaxing, just staying relaxed, breathing, you know, a temperate breath, and just gently watching the ball and trying to not be distracted.
Well, I mean, part of it is what kind of neuroplasticity do you want to build?
Oh.
Right? I don't want you frustrated and focusing, and because that's still going to build some neuroplasticity. That's my clinical observation from it. You can probably speak from more of like the actual Mendi side of it, but it's like when I have people, we do a lot of core work in the office, which seems like, what are you doing? You have people doing planks. Well, yeah, that feeds into midline cerebellum, that makes for a healthier brain, all of these different things. But it's very different than an athlete training to like complete fatigue, because I'm trying to train their brain. So I'm like, when you start to lose form, you stop. And then we do it again, and we do it again. So I want it to be proper form. So really for Mendi, you want to sit, you want to be relaxed.
Yeah, more is not better.
I want you stressing, because you're reinforcing that in your body. That's the same thing. okay, when this ball goes up, I'm all tense. I don't want that reinforced for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Another thing I've noticed, because I'm always experimenting with shit to see if I can get better at it. And some of the things I've done have made it worse, which I'll tell you about in a minute. But one thing I noticed is if I'm doing a Mendi session and I take a really deep breath, I'll get a little boost and the ball will start to go up. And I just assume, boy, you just got more oxygen in your blood, and it's seeing that. Is that what that is?
Yeah, you're sort of hacking the system. I mean, there's people that be like, oh, I do push-ups and then I do a Mendi session. We're like, that's not the point. That would be the same as you going to the gym, getting on the squat rack, and just not knowing what the numbers are. The barbells, like, just get rid of the colors, get rid of the numbers, and just be like, oh, you're like, well, that's great. You could have done 100 pounds, or you could have done 400 pounds. Awesome. How do you improve if you don't know, right? Or like being on the treadmill and running and not seeing the numbers. You don't know if you're running at 5 or if you're running at 15. So how do you know that you're actually building up that resilience and that strength? So that's the thing. It's what you want to do is you just want to relax and just basically do nothing. Don't move, like, just relax and do your Mendi session.
So you don't have to strain.
Don't be agitated.
It.
It's actually about being in the zone.
Yeah.
And once you're there, you're in there. Like, you're in that flow state. Like, it's not, for me, if I, like, my way of doing it is I start to feel my forehead get warmer. So it's been something that I've used from the beginning is I will just start recruiting the blood to my prefrontal cortex. That's how I imagine it.
Sure.
And that's basically how I do it. It's basically what I'm focusing on. And of course, if you talk to me, it'll drop, and I need to be better at not being distracted if you talk to me, I do Mendi sessions, for example, in the back of cars, in an Uber. I'll do a Mendi session on a flight. I fly all the time. I'm flying everywhere. I will always do a Mendi session on a flight. For me, that's how it is. Like, I just focus on getting the blood to the, I'm kind of consciously activating the neuroplasticity. That's my technique. I don't know what you tell your clients, how they use it, but
just relax usually and think about the ball going. That's usually how I describe it, especially to the kids. Like, use your imagination. So they're sitting there in a relaxed state, but using their imagination, because that's still going to start to bring blood flow. And then it starts having, like, the video of Mona, right?
Yeah.
He literally goes, what do I do? And I said, just think about it going up. And he looks at it and it starts going up and he's like, whoa, freaking out. And that's so cool for a kid to see the power that they have over their own mind. I mean, that's life-changing for a kiddo to see that.
Do you find kids respond well to this because it does have the look and feel of a game of sorts?
Oh, yeah. It's fun. I mean, I do a lot of boring stuff for them in the office, so this is a much more fun thing than, than, stim pod their brachial plexus and their arms jumping. That's not so fun for them.
That's hilarious. I had some of that the other day with a functional neurologist. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, over at Alive and Well, Dr. Carla. I don't even know her last name. I just call her Dr. Carla. But yeah, she has all those vagal nerve, activators and all this stuff. Yeah, she hooks me up to all this crazy stuff. I imagine as a kid, this would be way more fun than some of that would be. What about the resilience? As I said today, I think this might be the highest resilience of 11,600 that I've ever gotten. What does that score tell you? Yeah,
so the resilience is a metric, and you can go into in the app the explanation of them, but basically it's kind of like the sum of the strength that you've added to your prefrontal cortex.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So I've done some experiments with this, I usually do it in the morning, so I switch up the morning routine to see what gives me the highest score. And if I was doing this thing called the Lucia light back there, this hypnagogic kind of psychedelic light, and I put on this software called NeuCalm, which is a neuroacoustic software. It's really relaxing, drops you into theta. So I'd basically just be in drooling kind of psychedelic zone. And then I'd do my Mendi and I would get really low scores.
I could imagine
it. I think I was just like spaced out, theta, not activated. And I was like, okay, that sucks, so I'm not doing that. I'm not doing it that way. Mm-hmm. Then I started going down to the biocharger. and sitting in front of the biocharger. Dude, if you do the Mendi in front of the biocharger, it goes crazy.
You're brave. I would not sit in front of the biocharger with that Mendi on my head.
Well, brave / stupid, you know, depends how you look at it. But yeah, it goes crazy, but I don't feel like I've only done it a few times because I feel like, well, I'm totally cheating.
You're hacking.
My brain's getting so
completely.
much energy artificially that the thing's just going, wow. But then it's interesting because you can watch, you know, the biocharger has these frequency sets, and you can watch, you know, it's on 1700 you know, kilohertz or whatever it is, right? And so you can watch it cycle through the sets, and I would watch my Mendi score, and it would be like, biocharger's going, and my little ball's cranking up, and then the biocharger switches gears in a different frequency, and then it goes and just plummets. It's really trippy to watch.
Interesting.
Yeah. But I just didn't, I thought, well, am I really getting benefit because my brain's getting so much help?
It's like you doing a military press and I'm behind you.
Yeah, something like that.
You're not getting that much.
If you're going to take
on
the time to do it.
Something like that. But, you know, I'm an experimenter and all that.
Makes sense.
So I did another experiment a couple months ago. I was packing for an evening plant medicine ceremony. And I was putting my minerals and my little, you know, survival kit together. And I thought, ooh, I'm not going to promise this to myself, but if I remember and it's appropriate, it feels like it's okay to do within my own experience, I'm going to do a Mendi on medicine and see what happens. So it's like toward the end of the night, and had already had kind of the peak experience, but was still definitely not able to drive a car or anything like that. I was just kind of going to rest, and at the end I remembered it was in my bag, and I did when I was like, I feel like my brain is so on fire, you know, in the best sense, just firing on all cylinders, right? And I'm like, oh, I bet this Mendi score is going to be super high. So I put it on and do the 15-minute session. Worst score ever. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know what that means, you know, from a neurochemistry point of view. And I was like, okay, note to self, the prefrontal cortex not activated with those particular substances. Yeah, so that was my one. But that leads me to a question about neuroplasticity. So there's a growing trend, which I think is largely positive, where people, even within the scientific community, are understanding that certain substances, like psilocybin, for example, can dramatically improve neuroplasticity.
A lot of the people on our team are experts in this and study them. Like
really?
Ben Rain, for example, from Stanford, he does, you know, he'll do everything like research on what's it called, on mice with MDMA, and they start behaving in a completely different way. They're like,
I bet.
They're so
they
nice
start
to
hugging each other.
Yeah. No,
they start saying, "I love you, man."
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So I wonder, as was the case this morning, and I don't know if this is the sole reason for this, but I got really high scores, and I had that microdose that I described earlier today. I wonder if there's any, and I'm not, you know, encouraging any illegal behavior, you know, do this stuff where it's legal, kids. But let's say someone was microdosing LSD, DMT, mushrooms, or whatever, and you're encouraging that neuroplasticity, and you're in that state. Could there hypothetically be an added benefit of using the Mendi while your brain is very neuroplastic?
Can I say it off the record?
Yes, everything here is off.
This is not medical advice.
Yeah.
It makes sense to me. So that's what I can say. Theoretically, that would make sense to me. But I have kind of it's going to piss some people off. I have kind of a controversial view of all these people trying to build neuroplasticity, because what the fuck are you doing with it? When your brain is trying to create neuroplasticity, it does it in a very specific way. So you're building all of these new roads, and if you think of it like a subdivision with all of these roads, right? So, okay, you're microdosing and you have all of these new roads. That's not efficient at all. You want superhighways, ideally positive neuroplasticity, not negative neuroplasticity. So what I have observed in my friends, I have a lot of friends in LA, they've been doing this for a long time, and there's some things that don't speak to me to do, and this is something that I've just chosen to observe. And they're suddenly like having these different issues or perseverations or these things, and I'm like, you're creating this neuroplasticity and you're not doing anything with it. And now it's actually less efficient, because the brain goes through a building neuroplasticity and then pruning, so then it creates those superhighways, is how it should go. So when someone's in my office and I'm trying to create positive neuroplasticity. I'm doing it in a very specific way to build these super highways.
Right.
It's not, yes, exactly. It's not like willy-nilly, neuroplasticity is good, let's just do this.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because then I observe people coming in and they're like, I'm having all of these vague things go on, and you're actually reducing efficiency.
Oh, this is interesting. So in the realm of microdosing.
And this is like mostly my observations over the years and my knowledge of neurology.
Yeah. Well, that's.
I haven't read a paper on it. It's probably out there. I hope it is, but I haven't had time to get to that yet.
I mean, it fundamentally makes sense, though,
Yeah.
right? It has to do with everything, like with plant medicines and psychedelics and the integration. It's like
That's the key part of it. If you're going to
Yeah.
do it, integrate it, do something with it. So to answer your question,
Yeah.
theoretically, if someone's going to microdose, these are doing something with it.
right.
Put the Mendi on, do something with it. I guess. I don't know. I don't know if I can legally say that.
Well, this is a great point, because this is why psychedelics can be so dangerous.
Yes.
And I talk about them a lot on the
Yes.
show, and I always do my best to give disclaimers. It's not for everyone. Be careful.
They can have beautiful results, but
Right, but
not
earlier
always.
in life, like you had your overdose on alcohol or tequila, Coke, and LSD, which I'm sure I've had that combination for sure.
Many times.
Just didn't OD. But I mean, thinking back in my early years when I was, a kid with unhealed trauma and was addicted
Yeah.
to all these drugs, and I was using psychedelics like candy. I mean, just no discrimination whatsoever, and had so many bad trips I can't even count. So I was traumatizing myself emotionally, traumatizing my brain
Sure.
by creating all this neuroplasticity and then putting myself in really dangerous, toxic situations.
I mean, theoretically.
Which is like what the definition of a bad trip, right? Is like you think it's going to be one thing, you didn't plan shit well, and now you're in a dark place
Yeah.
because you're so sensitive and open to the energies.
You've
because
added
it's
all
powerful.
this unnecessary complexity,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
That's how I would understand it. I think the beauty of things being easy is that they're simple. So
Yes.
the analogy of the highway makes sense to me, but a bunch of little dirt roads doesn't sound
Yeah.
easy to me. So
It's
I
not
can
easy, it's not
understand your point.
efficient, it's not what the brain wants. The brain wants efficiency.
Wow,
Yeah.
I'm so glad I asked that, because that's going to be really useful for a lot of people that are just kind of, following the trend. Oh, everyone's microdosing, it's good for your brain. Well, it depends what you're doing with your brain when it's in
Totally.
that plastic state.
Totally.
Shit.
Yeah.
So we should play an instrument, do a Mendi, spend some quality time with someone. I don't know. Now I'm thinking much more intentionally about it.
Yeah.
I think myself and many other people think about microdosing as like just another supplement, like a nootropic. It's like, oh yeah, today I'll do some LSD, tomorrow I'll do some mushrooms, whatever. Because you do subjectively, at least in my experience, have access to more focus or creativity, and you have a better mood. You might not be anxious or depressed, but it's a really good point that you might be building grooves in ways that don't serve you.
Well, and it depends on the state of the person when they start, like you said, when you were
Right.
younger versus now. When
Right.
you've worked through stuff and you're doing it, that's different too.
True. What do you see happening results-wise in your clinic with kids with autism and issues like that, using the Mendi and other modalities that you work with?
So, just in general, it's making life easier. Like, things are just, and that's how it felt for me. Everything was just hard. I'm like, why is everything just so much harder? It feels harder for me, harder to focus, harder to, deal with the lights, the sounds, the, whatever. So a lot of it, how I'll describe it to the parents or the kids if they're old enough, and I'm like, hey, there's nothing wrong with you, but what if we could make life a little easier, not so hard? And they're like, yeah, that sounds good, right? Sounds good to everybody. So whatever modality I'm using, and Mendi is absolutely included in that, that's like kind of the perspective. And obviously I'm boiling that down to a very simple explanation to I'm looking at a super complicated picture of this person's brain. But like for autism patients, we see someone who, it might be me, I have kids, I come in and I'm just like a stressed out mom, but it also might be nonverbal tantrums all the time, the really, really severe cases. We see all of that. And don't usually put the Mendi on those kids because it's going to get chucked across the room.
Yeah, they'll break it.
Yes.
Wow. And how has your life changed since you diagnosed yourself or were diagnosed with autism later in life.
I know. So I did, self-diagnosis is completely acceptable within this, but because I'm in this field, I actually got 2 separate professional opinions because I just didn't ever want someone being like, oh, that was your opinion, you know, anything like that. So I did have that done from 2 separate people. And really it's allowed myself 2 things, more grace and not so hard on myself, because I tend to historically be very hard on myself. I go very much into my masculine, and I've really worked in the last few years to stay in my feminine. And when I'm being hard on myself, that's really, I'm just expecting myself to push harder, to work, you know, in that masculine energy that it just causes burnout, especially in females. And I've done that repeatedly in my life. And I'm resilient as fuck, so I get up and go again, but that's not necessarily the ideal way to do it. So it's allowed myself more grace, and it's also created a different way of looking at myself because I know what to do and I have the tools. That's such a rare thing that now I'm like, oh, okay, I need to bring up my right brain. I need to do some vagal stim. I need to do the Mendi, work on my prefrontal cortex, and I know the things to do. So before, I knew I was a left brain female, but I was like, you know, whatever, not taking the time for it. So it's really allowed me the space to be like, this actually is important. So I'd say those
Amazing.
2 things. Yeah.
Man, that's so cool that you had the impetus to do that, to just look into it.
I know.
Right? Like, what a huge change in
I know.
your life.
It really is.
It's wild.
Yeah.
You could have lived your entire life not knowing that information
Yeah.
and still hitting up against.
And I actually think I was very, very close to my grandmother, and I'm quite certain that she was autistic as well. We were very close. You know, from as young as I can remember, she's chasing me down with essential oils and smudging me and like all of these things. That's
Really?
where I learned all
Where
that
did you all
from.
live?
In Wisconsin.
Oh,
I grew up in
really?
Wisconsin.
She was in Wisconsin.
She was like a Reiki master. She did
Really?
all the things. Yeah, so this is funny. I was young, so don't hold it against me. But I didn't know that Atlantis wasn't real until I was in middle school. Because she spoke of it. I mean, and I say real, like I obviously have my thoughts on it now. But I feel like she spoke of it as though it was another continent. So like I was just in that world, and it was such a blessing to be in that world because I can go so into the spiritual side and so into the scientific side and really relate to both and then bring it together with the brain because it all still comes back to the brain and a healthy brain.
Wow.
Yeah, because I've sat in ceremony, I've sat with people who are very spiritual and they're just like perpetually lost because their brain is just not functioning the way it should. You have to work on that. Yeah.
Thank God for New Age Granny.
I know.
That's great.
I know.
I love that.
Yeah.
Tell us about your clinic. Where can people find you? It's the NeuroSolution Center?
NeuroSolution Center of Austin. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're in Cedar Park.
Okay,
Not
cool.
too far from here.
And what's the website? We'll put it in the show notes at lukestorey.com/Mendi.
Yeah.
So people can click on
It's neurosolutionatx.com, I think, but double check the show notes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
We'll make sure and get the right one in there.
Yes, make sure you do.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. It's an incredible team. Like I said before, it's not just me. I mean, it is literally everyone from the front desk to the techs that I work with. It completely makes the team, and everyone who comes in can see that. Because it's a hard job.
Oh, man.
Day in and day out. It's very emotional. Like, I mean, I saw patients for 4 hours before I came in here, and I don't stop. It's 4 hours straight, a lunch break, and 4 hours straight again, from patient to patient, nonstop. And so it takes a team. But we also, this is the first office I've worked in where we take it seriously. If we can tell someone is like getting off, if I'm getting really aspy, they're like, hey, work on yourself. And it's a beautiful environment to be in, where someone will, you know, hand you a Mendi or hand you a stim pod or grab a couple lasers. It's a really good environment to be in. And it's, you know, we walk the talk.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It's a great resource. I'm glad we met. Thanks for the intro, dude.
Yeah.
Moha's a great connector. You know, I think he and I
He is.
share that skill. So does Josh. Josh is the same way. You know, just when I was like, hey man, can you bring someone kind of sciencey, you know, to talk? Because I know we'll just shoot the shit and just kind of, you know, not get down to the nitty gritty because we're both like that. And he's like, I know the perfect person. You know, it really worked out.
I just met her. She's great. I'm gonna bring her.
So cool.
Yeah.
So you live, Moha, in Sweden most of the time? Do you have like a...
I probably spent more time in Austin this year than anywhere else. I'm in LA now for a few weeks.
Okay.
I'm going to be in the US a lot this year.
I mean, where do you have a home?
Sweden, Stockholm,
Okay.
Sweden.
Stockholm,
yeah.
Sweden, okay.
But I'm going to be a lot between. I'm going to be in the U.S. a lot. Got some trips back and forth to Dubai, which has become a base
Okay.
as well.
And do you have a residence in Costa Rica, or do your parents still live there?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I've been in Costa Rica 3-4 times this year already. So,
Wow.
and it's only July, so
Cool.
I go there a lot.
I'm jealous.
We
I've
need
only
to do a
been
trip
once.
together. We need to
I've
do a
only
trip
been
together.
once. We didn't want to leave. Allison had never been there, and she was like, "We got to move here. I'm done."
Yeah.
I'm like, we just got to Austin. Yeah, she's a jungle girl. She's like, yeah, she's a jungle cat. Yeah, that's her book right there.
Can't wait to meet her. Oh, is that?
That's her-
that
that's
looks
her book.
incredible.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
That's her power. The book's called Animal Power.
I
That's,
love that. I'll
We're
get
gonna have
that.
to dig into that.
That's
Yeah.
why that one got the cover. Yeah.
Love
Wow.
it.
So you're going to be spending time more in the States. Here's my vote. I recommend that you get a place in Austin.
Yeah.
Yeah, get a little apartment, man. There's a lot going on here. There's a lot of great people like me.
I love
Josh
Austin.
Trent,
I
all of
love
our
Austin.
friends.
Well, I've got family here now. I consider you guys family. It's the second time
Yeah.
I ever see you, but you know how it's been since the first
Cool.
day, man.
Cool.
I pulled you aside and I said, I love your energy.
Yeah,
We're
you
going to be
did.
friends, man. I want to hang out with you
Yeah.
more.
You
So
did.
thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been great. It's been great. No, I love that dinner, like I said, because we all, I don't know, it was almost like a round table setup, you know, where like each person kind of had their lane and
Yeah.
we all got to share. And I find it fun when you're in a social situation. I mean, I love learning about other people. I'm very interested in people, which is why I sit and talk to them for a living.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also fun sometimes to be able to express yourself and share you too, you know. So that night was really fun because we all got a little time just to kind of like sprinkle our magic at the table. So it was real cool.
Beautiful night.
All right, you guys. Well, I think we did it. Hot damn! Thank you so much for your time and energy today. It's been really fun. I feel like we could just keep talking. I just want to hang
Yeah,
out
we
and shoot
definitely
shit.
could.
But for the benefit of the listener, we will shut this one down.
And keep talking off camera.
And we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you.